Hello YouTube, welcome to another Pre-Season 7 Champion Guide. Today we're going to cover another assassin who did receive a number of changes in that assassin rework, Kha'Zix.
Change is good.
For more of my content, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/egamingtv or on Twitter at egaming_TV. All of the links for my social medias and the timestamps for this guide will be down in the video description, so make sure you check that out. I do Riot Point giveaways at the end of every month on my Twitter, as well as a poll each night on which champion I should cover the next day. So, if you're interested in entering those Riot Point giveaways, or you want to vote on which champion guide should be next, make sure you head over to Twitter. Enough of that, let's cover some pros and cons. So Kha'Zix, yet again, since he is an assassin, is very fun to play and has very high snowball potential. He's great at finding picks with his E ability, and he does high burst damage with the rest of his kit. With his reworked Q, he's an amazing duelist, and he's got very high mobility from his leap and his ultimate. Kha'Zix, however, like the rest of the assassins out there, is a very squishy champion. He's also got no hard CC in his kit, all he brings is a slow from his W and his passive. Of course, besides that ridiculous amount of burst damage he also brings. Being the squishy champion he is, he's also very weak against CC. If he does jump into the middle of a team fight, he's going to eat a CC and be two-shot. This is also part of the reason he is so hard to master. You have to be very patient on Kha'Zix and look for your opportunity to strike. Since he is an assassin, he also needs those items so he can actually delete his targets, and levels are very important as well so he can evolve his abilities. I will say right off the top as well that Kha'Zix's changes are by far my favorite in the whole 6.22 patch. For our Masteries, we go 12 Ferocity and 18 Cunning, grabbing Thunderlord's Decree as our Keystone Mastery. Storm Raider Surge is also a pretty decent option as well, but I do prefer Thunderlord's Decree. I like having that extra damage in my combos. Other than that, in the rest of our Masteries, focus on getting as much damage as possible. Greenfather's Gift is really strong on Kha'Zix since we will be coming out of bushes, and it works really good with your ultimate if you do evolve it. For my runes, I go for attack damage reds, armor yellows, cooldown reduction blues, 1 cooldown reduction quint, and 2 attack damage quints. Now, even though my most common build does already have 40% CDR in it, I like having 10% CDR in the early game. It will really help your jungle clears and make your ganks more effective as well. I'm also not a big fan of lethality on Kha'Zix. I do prefer having the attack damage because it works really well with your Q. Of course, lethality is a viable option, but I'm not too big of a fan of it. For your first required summoner spell, you'll want to take Smite because you are a jungler after all. It will help keep you sustained in the jungle and allow you to clear through the whole thing. It's also great for securing Dragon and Baron, and the offensive smite is a great way to either increase your damage or make your ganks more effective. This of course depends if you took the Stalkers or the Skirmishers. Flash is then our second required summoner spell. It's a great escape tool if we get caught in a bad position, but it's also excellent when used offensively to help chase a low health enemy. Don't take anything besides Smite and Flash. Now let's kick off those abilities with our passive, Unseen Threat. Kha'Zix gains Unseen Threat when the enemy team loses sight of him, causing his next basic attack against an enemy champion to deal bonus magic damage and slow them by 25% for 2 seconds. So this ability is the same as before, and it works great with our ultimate because if we do go in stealth with our ultimate, obviously the enemy will lose sight of us and our next basic attack will deal bonus damage because of this passive. It's also great in ganks because we can first slow the enemy with our W, go in, slow them with our passive, and get a rather easy kill. Now let's look at our main source of damage, our Q, Taste Their Fear. Kha'Zix slashes the target enemy, dealing physical damage increased by 50% against isolated targets. The evolved Reaper Claws now grant you 50 bonus range on your basic attacks in Taste Their Fear. If the target is isolated, 60% of Taste Their Fear's cooldown is refunded. So this evolved form no longer directly increases that damage on your Q, but instead refunds part of its cooldown. This is of course also if the enemy is isolated, which means of course by themselves. Before, your evolved Q was so strong you had no choice but to take it either first or second, but now you don't have to necessarily. I still like to evolve this first because I do find myself 1v1ing a lot of the time, and having that reduced cooldown is pretty amazing and really increases your damage output. Part of the reason I like the new Kha'Zix is because all of your evolves are very viable to take first. But either way, we do max this one first because it does increase our damage, has a really nice bonus AD ratio, and does a lot of damage against isolated targets. Alright, let's move on to your W ability, Void Spike. Kha'Zix fires a cluster of spikes in a line that detonate upon hitting an enemy, dealing them physical damage. Kha'Zix also heals himself if he is in the detonation radius. If you evolve this ability, you get evolved Spike Racks. Void Spike will now fire 3 clusters in a cone, slows by 40%, and grants sight of enemy champions hit for 2 seconds. If the target is isolated, it will instead slow by 80%. So this is a great ability because it does add some AoE in our kit, will keep us sustained in the jungle, and allows us to poke from range before a teamfight starts. I personally don't really evolve this one first, sometimes I do take it second if I do want to be more of a support slash team fighter and not a ganker slash duelist. I like to max this ability second since it does do a lot of damage, and you can do it from range. Now our last basic ability, RE, Leap. Kha'Zix leaps to the target location, dealing physical damage to nearby enemies upon landing. Its evolved form is called Evolved Wings, and Leap gains range, and its cooldown is reset on an enemy champion takedown. So it's the exact same ability, but before this rework, the range was 600 in normal form and 900 in the evolved form. Now it's 700 and 900, so it's not as big of a deal to evolve this ability. At least for the Leap range anyways, it's still really strong because of the reset on an enemy champion takedown. The AD ratio also sucks, it's 20% bonus AD, so we do have to max our Q and W first. Just make sure you take one early point so you can actually jump onto the enemy champions and have a successful gank. Now we arrive at your ultimate, Void Assault. Passively, each rank in this ability allows Kha'Zix to evolve an ability, and as we know, you are granted an additional effect. When you activate this ability, you enter invisibility for 1.25 seconds, acquire Unseen Threat, which is your passive, gain 40% bonus movement speed, and Ghost while stealthed. After 2 seconds of leaving stealth and for the next 10 seconds, Void Assault can be cast a second time at no additional mana cost. The evolved form is reworked and it's called Adaptive Cloaking. Before, it was pretty strong because you could activate this a third time, but now, while you are out of combat, Kha'Zix also passively gains Void Assault for 2.5 seconds in a brush. This then persists for 1.5 seconds after exiting the brush, and 10 seconds per brush cooldown. People thought this was going to be absolutely broken, but it's just decent. The only time I would evolve this first is if I was against a weak jungler and I wanted to invade the jungle over and over again. The base form is really strong though because the invisibility and movement speed allow you to reposition in team fights, and that unseen threat you gain each time you use it is really strong because it will add a lot of damage. For our skill order, we first put a point into our ultimate whenever we can at 6, 11, and 16. We don't have any choice but to because evolving abilities is really important. We then focus on maxing our Q first because it is our main source of damage for deleting targets. Then we want to max our W because it's a great poking tool and it will keep us sustained in the jungle as well. We then max our E last because it's only got a 20% AD ratio, we just gotta get one early point at level 3 so we can actually jump onto targets and delete them in ganks. With Kha'Zix's reworked kit, he no longer has a standard evolution order. So if we want to be more of a duelist slash ganker, we'll first take our Taste Their Fear, followed by our Leap, and then choose either Void Spike or Void Assault. If you want to be more of a support slash team fighter, we'll first evolve our Leap so we can actually jump target to target, then evolve our W so we can easily poke the enemy team, and follow it with our Taste Their Fear, so if we do get on a single enemy, we can do a lot of damage. If we want to invade and have a lot of map pressure, we'll take our Void Assault first so we can stealth in bushes, then take our Leap second. Then if we want to do more damage in duels, we'll take Taste Their Fear, and if we want to be more of a team fighter, take Void Spike third. You may end up with a standard evolution order for yourself, but this is based off of your playstyle. I like to go for the duelist slash ganker one because I do find myself leaping from target to target, and I like that increased damage from Taste Their Fear in those ganks and teamfights. I then usually take Void Assault third myself, but sometimes I do take Void Spike if I do want to have increased poke. For our first basic combo, we start by jumping onto the target with our Leap. We then hit the enemy with Taste Their Fear and land an auto attack to proc our Thunderlord's Decree. You also have the option of landing Void Spike before you combo this to slow the enemy before you go in for that leap. For our all-in with items, we first activate our Yumu's Ghost Blade if we did buy one. Then slow the enemy with our Void Spike, and then jump onto the target with our Leap. Activate your Tiamat mid-air, and as soon as you land, hit the enemy with Taste Their Fear. Then follow that up with a really fast auto attack, and then you can now reposition with your Void Assault, or if you need to, use it to get your Unseen Threat passive. Kha'Zix has an okay jungle clear, but it's not the best. He's not one of those champions with a ton of AoE that thrives in the new jungle. Because of this, I generally like to do the blue buff first, then kill wolves, and then do red buff and smite that to end up at full health. Of course, you'll also be level 3 and have access to your full kit. If your bot lane is on red side, well then you can take red first, then move on to wolves, and then smite blue buff, kind of the same but in reverse. I really like this on Kha'Zix because you will get a really fast level 3, and then you can go for an early gank, or you could even invade the enemy jungler. Kha'Zix makes a really solid counter jungler since the enemy jungler will usually be isolated. You're able to outduel the majority of the junglers out there as long as they are isolated. And the off chance that you start losing a duel or the enemy rotates for you, you can easily leap out of the danger zone. Your counter jungling gets even better if you have evolved your Void Assault. Gaining Void Assault passively when you enter bushes is a great way to catch your enemy off guard and also escape the enemy jungle if you need to. If you're against something weak early on like a Mumu, then I'd consider evolving Void Assault first and shutting his ass down. When ganking on Kha'Zix, I like to save my leap for when the enemy uses an escape ability or they flash. Try to walk into lane when the enemy is pushed and land a slow with your Void Spike and then hit them with Taste Their Fear while holding on to leap. If the enemy has used flash beforehand or has no built-in escape in their kit, then I usually just leap to the target for a quicker, more efficient gank. You can do even cheesier ganks by stealthing into bushes using your Void Assault, but keep in mind it only lasts 1.25 seconds, so if minions are nearby, it may be impossible to pull off. In teamfights, Kha'Zix can either be devastating or 100% useless. He requires a lot of patience. You're gonna need to wait until you know for sure that you can get a reset if you leap onto an enemy champion. Try to position yourself on the side or behind the enemy team before a fight breaks out and wait for your opportunity. Kha'Zix is pretty much a cleanup artist. If you see multiple enemies low, you can leap from target to target if you did evolve it and clean up an entire teamfight. If it's possible, look for an isolated target to destroy them with Taste Their Fear. It will increase your chances of getting a reset. Now let's look at a couple hard matchups, starting with Udyr. He's a pretty damn tanky champion that does a lot of damage at the same time in the early game with his Phoenix stance. Try to kite out the damage from his Phoenix stance with your Void Spike and spend the majority of your time ganking his team. Avoid Udyr at all costs. Nocturne can then be a hard champion for you in the early game since he can block your Taste Their Fear with his Shroud of Darkness. He'll be a lot easier to deal with when you have some cooldown reduction and you have evolved your Taste Their Fear. Last here is Lee Sin. He's another champion that's hard for you in the early game because he does a lot of damage with his Sonic Wave / Resonating Strike plus Dragon Rage combo. He's then of course able to reveal you with either his Sonic Wave or his Tempest, which is pretty friggin' annoying to deal with as well. Alright, let's finish off this guide with our item build. So we're going to want to start with a Hunter's Talisman, Refillable Potion, and a Warding Totem. Now if you are going to go for a Ravenous Hydra in your build at some point, you want to get an early Tiamat. You'll want to get it either after your Warrior Enchantment or your Yumu's if you are going for a Yumu's. For our core build, we take a Skirmishers enchanted with Warrior, Yumu's Ghostblade, and a Duskblade. Yumu's is no longer a 100% requirement as it has been nerfed a little bit, but it's still really strong and I do like taking it on Kha'Zix. Warrior Enchantment of course then adds a lot of damage on your Q and the rest of your kit, and Duskblade is probably the best assassin item in the entire game at the moment. For your boot options, we have Aeonians if you need 10% CDR, Merc Treads if you need to break CC / get some MR, Boots of Mobility if you're going to spend a lot of your time ganking, Boots of Swiftness for all-around mobility, and Ninja Tabis if you are against a very high AD team. For your offensive item pool, we first have the Black Cleaver and a Trinity Force. Both items here are really solid since you do get 20% CDR, but I definitely prefer the Black Cleaver over the Trinity Force. It's a great way to shred some extra armor in the later stages of the game. We of course then have the Ravenous Hydra. It's a really strong item on assassins, and it does give lifesteal as well, which is pretty damn nice. I almost always get this item myself because I always get an early Tiamat, and why the hell would you not upgrade it in the later stages of the game? Death's Dance is a good pickup as well if you don't like going for a Ravenous Hydra, but you still want lifesteal, and you could use extra 10% CDR. Then to get through the late game armor, LDR is a great item, and if you do need Grievous Wounds, then get the Mortal Reminder. For your defensive item pool, we first have Edge of Night. It's a really solid item because it does give you some magic resist and extra damage, but you can also channel it for a spell shield, which can give you some nice survivability in a teamfight. We then have the two shield items, Maw and Sterak's Gauge. Both are great because they do add some extra damage, yet give you a defensive shield. Just make sure you don't get both because they don't stack. Then we have the Guardian Angel, a great way to get some magic resist and armor, and come back to life in the later stages of the game. Then we have the Dead Man's Plate. It's a great way to get some health in your health pool and some armor, but also increases your mobility, which makes it a pretty solid item. If the enemy has a ton of CCs, then we may want to get a Mercurial Scimitar or a Banshee's Veil. One passively blocks spells, and the other lets you take off one spell whenever you want. So for our normal full build, we take our core, get Merc Tread since we'll already have 40% CDR, and get a Black Cleaver and a Ravenous Hydra. We'll have some nice item ability from the Boots, the Duskblade, and the Yumu's Ghostblade, and a ton of damage from pretty much every single item in that build. If the game went really late, then I would also replace the Yumu's Ghostblade with something like an LDR. You are, however, going to be insanely squishy, so make sure you enter the team fight at the right time. But that, ladies and gentlemen, covers everything I've got on Jungle Kha'Zix. Don't forget to check out the video description for a link to all of my social medias if you are looking for more of my content. But other than that, thank you guys a ton for watching, I hope you guys did learn something new, and I will see you guys in the next champion guide. Peace!